let's be honest, this isn't really a referendum, is it?
No, it's not, Arlene, and it's great to be back on your show. It's good to see you again. You described it in your setup there as a pretendy ref. I saw actually the Spectator this morning calling it a stunt, and I think that's what it is. I mean, leaving aside, that we had a huge Democratic vote in 2014, which returned overwhelmingly a verdict of we want to stay part of the UK. That hasn't changed. And the fact is, the people don't want another referendum up here. They don't want to come out of the United Kingdom. And actually, what we must be doing is focusing on the things that matter. Because let's be clear about this. What Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP are trying to do is distract from their dismal record on running public services. So we have huge NHS waiting lists. We have an attainment gap, which is really concerning a lot of people. We have a ferries fiasco. We have our trains are a fiasco at the moment since the Scottish Government took over. We have violent crime, the highest in a decade. We have, I think, a quarter of criminals over the last 5 years have dodged going to court at all. So that's what's going on here. And we think that what we must be focused on is the things that matter to people, like our public services, not, as you called it quite rightly, a pretendy ref.
So, Liam, let's talk about one of those issues, and you've mentioned it there, and let's talk about education. And the fact is, in Scotland, you spend 7% more on education than in England, and yet that attainment gap has grown exponentially. And that's just one area. So why isn't the First Minister being held to account on issues like that, and instead what we're talking about today is an independence referendum, which it appears Scotland voters don't want?
You're absolutely right, Arlene. And let me be clear, we are holding her to account. The opposition parties in Scotland are desperately trying to ensure that the agenda is entirely focused on the things that matter, like the attainment gap that you just brought up. Unfortunately, because of this SNP Green coalition of chaos that we have up in Scotland, they are deciding to distract from the things like the attainment gap, the NHS waiting list, the violent crime rising, by throwing in this pretendy ref stunt, as we were talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a few certainties in life, but one of the certainties is that no matter what political event happens, it's used by Republicans and Nationalists, whether in Scotland or in Northern Ireland, to say, and that is why we have to have an independent Scotland or a united Ireland. I mean, I read somewhere the other day that one of the reasons that was being used is the pandemic. Because of the pandemic and the way in which it was being handled, that we needed an independent Scotland. I would have thought, given the fact that we had access to a vaccine across the UK in the way that we had, it would have been one of the reasons we would use to stay within the Union.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the Union has proved quite how successful it has been during the pandemic in terms of the vaccine, in terms of the furlough scheme. But again, your point was absolutely right, Arlene. We had First Minister's questions yesterday, and the leaders of the Scottish Conservatives, the leaders of Scottish Labour brought up the police, the situation we have in the police with our police are taking the industrial action at the moment with the biggest work to rule for, I think, about a century. We brought up the cancer waiting times in Scotland, and every single time the First Minister plays it back to somehow blame the UK, to blame Westminster. And I think this is the thing. People are seeing through this tactic of hers now. They're seeing through that it doesn't matter what the failures of her dismal coalition up in Scotland, that everything will be played back to somehow blame it on Westminster. People see through that. She's taking the people of Scotland for fools, and they won't accept it.
And just finally, Liam, I don't know whether you noticed today, but it appears that Kate Forbes, who's the Finance Minister for the SNP, is aghast at the fact that money has been sent to Ukraine and aid has been sent to Ukraine, and she wants to object to that. I mean, what's your thoughts about that today?
I think that the Scottish Government would be far better focused on looking at why they're putting £20 million, 20 million, mind, into this pretendy ref campaign, and why they have assigned 20 civil servants specifically within the civil service to draw up the case for separation. I think that's an appalling dereliction of duty. duty and an appalling waste of money. And I think Kate Forbes would be far better spending her time looking at that rather than perfectly appropriate measures elsewhere.